All right, let's cut through the noise. We're watching a dangerous play unfold, and the script they're reading from doesn't match the reality on the ground. We're talking about potential military action, regime change, and the kind of rhetoric that sounds bold but crumbles under scrutiny. This isn't just about geopolitics. It's about the truth, the stakes for American lives, and the credibility of those making decisions. We're going to dive into a raw, unfiltered conversation with military experts who are calling out the dangerous optimism and historical amnesia fueling this narrative. Stick around, because what they're saying is a stark warning we all need to hear. We see what's happening. Let's expose it.
Forces. Right. For Congress represents the American people, and the American people should have a say in whether or not their sons and daughters are put in harm's way.
Wait, what? The President of the United States, talking about future military action, casually drops a line about, "We may have casualties that often happens in war," as if it's an unfortunate but minor detail. That's not how that works. This isn't a video game. These are American sons and daughters. This isn't often happens in war. This is a catastrophic outcome for families across the nation. And then the general here hits us with the core truth. Congress represents the American people. The American people should have a say. That's documented. It's in our Constitution. It's the very foundation of our representative democracy. To treat a potentially devastating military conflict as something that can be initiated with a vague warning about casualties tucked into a speech without a robust debate in the People's House, that's not just problematic. It's a profound disregard for the process and the lives at stake. This isn't about hawkishness or dovishness. This is about accountability. It's about transparency. When you talk about putting Americans in harm's way, the conversation needs to be front and center, with every elected representative on the record, making the case, hearing the arguments, and voting, not a footnote in a presidential address. The general's point about going to Congress first isn't just a procedural suggestion. It's a fundamental check on executive power, designed to protect us from impulsive, ill-considered military adventures. When this isn't happening, you have to ask, what exactly are they trying to avoid debating?
Because again, regime change is very ugly. I've experienced it a couple of times in Iraq, and it is not easy to execute a regime change and have a new leadership step forward.
Regime change is very ugly. I have experienced it a couple of times in Iraq. That's on the record. This isn't some academic theory. This is a general speaking from direct, painful experience. When he says it's not easy to execute a regime change and have a new leadership step forward, he's not just speculating. He's telling us exactly what happens when you destabilize a nation with 90 million people and no clear, organized successor. The idea that you can simply decapitate a government and expect a smooth transition to a new, Western-friendly democracy is a fantasy. We saw the chaos in Iraq. We saw the power vacuums, the rise of extremist groups, the decades of instability that followed. To suggest that Iran, with its complex web of factions, security forces, and ethnic groups, would somehow be easier to manage is not just naive, it's dangerously ignorant of history. This isn't just about Iran. It's about a pattern of grand pronouncements from certain corners of Washington that consistently underestimate the real-world consequences of military intervention. They talk about noble missions while glossing over the ugly realities. This general, a man who has lived through it, is giving us a vital reality check. If this kind of breakdown matters to you, this is exactly what we do here. The stakes here are not just about a single leader, but about potentially plunging an entire region into unprecedented chaos, creating a humanitarian crisis, and empowering new, unforeseen threats. The general's warning isn't just tactical. It's a moral imperative to learn from past mistakes and avoid repeating them with even graver consequences.
What have you. The regime was able to replenish itself after absorbing that initial shock within 48 hours and then launched the counteroffensive against Israel.
Let's pause on that. The regime was able to replenish itself after absorbing that initial shock within 48 hours and then launched the counteroffensive against Israel. That's measurable. That's documented. This isn't theoretical. This is a recent, verifiable historical event. It utterly shatters the illusion that a surgical strike or a targeted assassination will somehow cause the Iranian regime to collapse like a house of cards. This isn't a fragile, easily toppled entity. This is a regime that has demonstrated a remarkable capacity for resilience and adaptation, even after severe blows. They have succession plans. They have decentralized power structures. They've rebuilt their leadership and retaliated in a matter of days. To ignore this documented capability is to engage in a dangerous form of wishful thinking that has absolutely no basis in reality. When you hear rhetoric about quick, decisive action leading to regime change, remember this point. Remember the 48-hour recovery. This isn't a regime that's going to simply vanish if you take out a few key figures. It's a deeply entrenched, multi-layered power structure that has been preparing for these kinds of contingencies for years. The implications are clear. Any plan that hinges on the swift, effortless collapse of the Iranian government is fundamentally flawed. It's built on a misunderstanding of their operational capabilities and their internal dynamics. We are being sold a narrative that directly contradicts the documented evidence of Iran's resilience. This isn't just bad intelligence. It's a dangerous misrepresentation of the enemy's strength, and it puts American lives and regional stability at tremendous risk.
So at some point you have to ask, what does the replacement plan look like? And I haven't heard from any Arab leader, by the way, who have been in touch with the U.S. administration about what that looks like.
What does the replacement plan look like? That's the critical question, isn't it? And the fact that no one, not the U.S. administration, not any Arab leader can articulate it is a flashing red light. This isn't just a tactical oversight. It's a fundamental flaw in the entire premise of pursuing regime change via air power. We've seen this movie before. We know how it ends. The general's stark comparison to Iraq is chilling. He knows firsthand the catastrophic consequences of collapsing a state without a viable, immediate, and widely accepted plan for what comes next. In Iraq, we disbanded the military, dissolved the civil service, and overnight created millions of angry, unemployed citizens. That's not how that works. That's a recipe for chaos, insurgency, and decades of instability. Why should voters care? Because this isn't abstract foreign policy. This is about potentially committing American resources, American lives, and American credibility to another open-ended, ill-defined conflict with no clear exit strategy. It's about the potential for regional conflagration that could draw in allies and adversaries alike, creating a humanitarian catastrophe on an unimaginable scale. Why should institutions care? Because the erosion of credibility, the repeated failure to learn from history, and the bypassing of democratic processes like congressional debate fundamentally weakens the very institutions designed to protect us. When leaders push for actions without a coherent day-after plan, they not only jeopardize our national security, but also undermine faith in our government's competence and integrity. The stakes couldn't be higher.
Iran, it is going to be much more difficult than what occurred in Iraq. And I got to tell you, I've got a lot of scar tissue from Iraq. It was extremely difficult there. And we had forces on the ground and named people that could take over, as he just mentioned a few minutes ago.
The scar tissue from Iraq, as the general painfully reminds us, is real. The lessons are written in blood and decades of instability. To ignore that experience, to rush into an even more complex scenario in Iran without a clear plan, without congressional buy-in, and without learning from the past is not just irresponsible, it's reckless. If the goal is stability, then the proposed actions must align with that outcome. If everything is winning, the numbers should confirm it, and the plans should be transparent. But what we're seeing is a dangerous gamble, cloaked in vague assurances. We deserve better. We demand accountability. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep demanding answers. Because the truth matters, especially when lives are on the line.